coming up on Open Source with Tony Motley.
AT&T announced that they lost in Q1 897,000 pay TV customers, on top of another 100+ thousand AT&T TV streaming-only customers. So combined, they lost 1 million TV customers. Do we see cord cutting? Yes. Is it impacting how content is packaged, how it's sold? Absolutely. And we're definitely going to continue to see that.
Dan Rayburn, the world's leading expert on video streaming, discusses the explosion of streaming platforms and the impending death of cable television. Welcome to Open Source. My guest today is Dan Rayburn. Dan is known as the voice of the video streaming industry. He has been quoted more than 2,000 times by nearly every media outlet in the past 20 years. Dan, welcome to Open Source.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. I mean, you're the man of the hour because in a lot of people's minds, streaming has become a new hot thing, but you say not so fast. Why is that?
Well, not that it's not become the hot thing. It's just that a lot of people don't know, right, because they're consumers, and why would they? But 2020 marks the 25th year that streaming media technology has been in the industry, right? My industry is 25 years old. So while there's a lot of people now that are going, oh, wow, I mean, look at Netflix's earnings and they got so many subscribers and video growth is everywhere. No doubt that's happening. But this technology has been around a long time. It's proven itself as a great way to consume content, whether that's audio, video, TV shows, movies, right? Whatever you want to consume. And we're definitely seeing some growth, but we also know that that growth is tempered. When people go back to school, start going back to work and go back to our lives, which of course will be really different forever, we will see a difference just in terms of the change of how people consume content.
What did streaming look like 25 years ago? And maybe it was happening in ways when people weren't aware of it. But what was considered streaming at the beginning? What are you talking about?
We're talking about no video, dial-up audio. So it was audio only for dial-up. We were pushing out, if you had a 28.8 modem or a 56K modem, we were pushing out like a 9,600 kilobit per second audio stream. And then when video did come out about 98, 99, when we first started to see some technologies out there, video streams then were 100 kilobits per second, 300 kilobits per second. So it was basically the size of a postage stamp. That's sort of the way we describe it. And it wasn't pushing many FPS, many frames per second. So it was obviously a very different experience than many consumers know today. But the amazing thing was from, let's say, 2000 all the way to even just 3 to 4 years later, 2003, 2004, the quality just jumped drastically. It went from something you couldn't really watch in 98 and 99, and you certainly couldn't watch it for a long period of time, to something where now all of a sudden it provided great quality because so many people had gotten broadband connections, right? ISDN lines and things back then, and then people started getting broadband to the home, and that really changed the industry.
Is there a watershed moment or a point where the general public would say, yeah, I remember that, where streaming really made its debut in people's minds as a viable video platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. Depends on your age, right? It depends where you are around the world. It depends what type of content you like. I think a lot of people would really first look at, from a mainstream standpoint, some of the first apps out there like MLB.tv. Right. MLB was really the first company to put out a OTT video service at scale with quality that a lot of people were interested in because obviously it was sports related. You have a lot of people who like different types of sports. So MLB.tv really gets credit in my industry for being one of the first applications out there that really helped bring a lot of mainstream adoption. But you also have Netflix. Obviously, when Netflix decided to get into the streaming market, it was just about the right time. It was a little early, which was fine for them. You didn't really have iPads in the market yet. You didn't have smart TVs for a couple of years. But it was at the time when consumers were looking for an alternative and the video quality was good enough. You had a lot of broadband now inside homes. So it was things like MLB.TV and Netflix. And I would also say before that, earlier, it was the news sites, CNN and some of the others. For anybody who's, been around a while, they'll remember the term CNN pipeline. Right? That was a video service where CNN actually charged money each month for you to see the news. So it used to be news sites actually charged a couple dollars a month just for you to be able to stream news, right? Which today we all just think of like, what? No one would pay to stream news, right? It's just ubiquitous. You can get it everywhere. So it was news sites, then it was sports, and then it was entertainment.
Now, and I guess sports has really been one of the biggest drivers, but we also saw this recently. Netflix is up 16 million subscribers since this pandemic has taken place. I mean, that's an incredible number. What does that say to you?
Well, it is an incredible number, but at the same time, we really have to keep that number in context, because to Netflix's credit about setting proper expectations in the market with investors in particular, of course, as a public company, is they've made it very clear that, the number was double what they originally thought it would be. They originally projected 7.5 million to Wall Street, new subscribers globally. But they also made it very clear that they do expect a bunch of subscribers to come off the service once people do go back to work and school. And also people in different areas have been inside for longer periods of time. Like here, I'm in New York, right? We're not going back to business or work anytime soon, right? Yet you have other states opening up today, actually, with certain things. So as people start to have this cycle in terms of when they're kind of released, and they're going to want to go out and see friends. They're going to want to go places. They're going to, not want to sit in front of their house, in front of the TV, which they've been doing for the past month, 2, 3, in the case of New Yorkers, maybe 4 months. So Netflix and some of the other services have been very good about just saying, yes, we've seen a huge surge in the last 60 days, but we do not expect this to last. We expect some of this just to be due to the environment and times that we're in. And then Netflix also said, as far as how their business looks for the second half of the year, they gave out some projections, but they said these are 100% complete guesses on our part, because this is just a new business environment that we've never seen before. So there's no doubt that consumers have been super happy to have video services of all kinds to be able to keep themselves busy, but also just think about, you churn through a lot of content when you're inside so much. So a lot of people too, okay, it's summertime, they're wanting to go outside, see their friends, they burn through everything they want to see. They've binge watched everything. Some new series and whatnot that they're looking for may not come out until Q3 or Q4 or later because of the delay in production. That's still unknown. So some of that is to be seen in the second half of the year.
Now, we still have situations across this country where there are people that don't have access to broadband. And are we anywhere near a significant plan to bring more people online? What can be done to bridge that gap?
Well, there's all kinds of things that are being talked about rural broadband America and all these different programs and some of the things the government does. And you see the media pick up on it where it's like, X some millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars have just been given to bring more broadband here, and ISPs talk about it. But then you read the fine print and it says things like, well, that money they're being given over a 10-year period. Right? It's not all at once. So there still is a lot of work to do in that regard. And the biggest problem that you have if you live in an area like that is there's not a big incentive for the ISP to bring broadband to those areas, because there's just not enough consumers or subscribers or customers to make it worth their while to put these services, typically fiber, in the ground, right? They got to dig up the ground. They got to lay fiber. It's super costly. So it really comes down to a business decision. It's not about we can't do it. It's just a matter of doesn't make sense for our business. So there's been a lot of talk about what could 5G do to help there. That's something you see. The FCC is doing a lot around the 6 gigahertz band to free up more spectrum for connecting 5G in home devices. So that's something we're seeing a lot of. But 5G is still many, many, many years away. But that's a good potential option in rural areas, so you don't have to bring physical infrastructure in. 5G would be a much better way to do it.
Let's talk about 5G, because you see it advertised, and it's like Baskin Robbins. There's so many different flavors of 5G right now. But what does 5G promise, and how would that, if you were going to relate that to what people are getting in terms of broadband right now, what would be the advantage of getting 5G in? I know it's simpler to install, I guess, because you don't have to dig up the earth in so many rural places. But what would 5G do to level the playing field for people?
Well, we don't know, right? We can't say. So all these companies talking about like speed and this and coverage and all that, keep in mind, it's not real today. It's very limited in major metropolitan cities. You don't know what it's actually going to be able to do at scale. The companies talk about speed, but then sites that actually cover this stuff and get the devices and go out and test it have put out tons of reports saying, well, the speeds are nowhere near what these companies are advertising. So the bottom line is it's way too early to know. They're spending a lot of money. We know it's the future to a degree, but the other thing that hasn't been figured out is the business model. So if you get 5G, first and foremost, you're going to have to upgrade your hardware because your current iPhone or Android phone probably doesn't support 5G. So one, are you willing to upgrade your hardware, pay more money? And two, we're not going to be given 5G for free. There's no way, right? So if you want 5G, somehow we're going to have to pay for it in additional costs through our plan, whether it's a fee, whatever they want to call it, right? We know the carriers don't give this stuff away for free. So are consumers today so dissatisfied with the service they're getting on their phone with 4G that they're willing to pay more for 5G? Many, I would say, are not.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you.
Don't have problems, right? Would you pay more? Now, specific instances, yes.
I think I can speed test my 4G, my LTE, and it's 80 meg, 70 meg. I mean, I could stream with it if I wanted to. So for me, there's no incentive to get 5G. But I don't know what kind of performance other people are getting.
And that's what it comes down to is, as consumers, we have different needs. We have different budgets. So we have to decide individually, does it make sense for us? So when you have some members of the media and analysts and others out there just going, well, 5G is going to revolutionize everything. Everybody's going to love it. Doesn't mean everyone's going to sign up for it, right? This isn't about the best technology. I mean, I've said this for so many years. The best technology is not what always gets adopted. What gets adopted is what's efficient, what's easy to use, what's affordable, right? Those are the services that do really well in the market. So 5G has a long way to go from a technical standpoint. It has a long way to go from a development capacity standpoint, rollout standpoint. It has to be implemented into the hardware, the devices, right? The software services have to take advantage of it. And then you have to figure out the business model. So 5G is not going to save, some people say it'll save the industry. First of all, our industry doesn't need saving. Second, it's not going to revolutionize anything because nobody's developing apps yet in 5G outside of very specific enterprise and business things like IoT, right? Certain kinds of tracking and all kinds of things. Some of the stuff happening in the military, of course, but consumer applications, not medical or telemedicine or things like that. Consumer applications for video or services or whatnot are still many, many, many years away.
If we look at broadband and over-the-top television, all these things from a global perspective, where does the United States rank, or who would you say is the market leader in terms of what they have, how advanced they are as a country? Are there other places that are doing this better than we are?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting question. So depends on the type of content, depends how you're measuring success. If you look at the Netherlands, they consume more data over mobile than any other country in the world, which is pretty incredible if you think about it. So that country has put mobile first. Right? They're ahead of the U.S. in that regard. In the U.S., we're definitely ahead of other countries, and I would say are the leading country when it comes to consuming high volume, high bit rate media entertainment content just in volume, right? We consume more in high definition between Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Disney Plus, all the other services in the U.S. than, say, Latin America, Europe, Asia, India, Australia. Just from a pure traffic standpoint, we definitely consume more. Over time, we're certainly seeing that shift. There's about 1,200, last time I looked at my list, there's about 1,200 different OTT services globally. You know, the U.S. has 300 to 400 of those. But the ones the U.S. has are also larger than niche services in very specific countries. However, look what we're seeing with Netflix. Right? That used to be just a U.S. service. It's rolled out international. Disney Plus has just gone to Europe. Hulu is going to roll out next year globally to some new regions as well. So you're definitely seeing these services scale and be thought of as global services as opposed to regional services. But I don't really look at it overall the way you're asking the question. I look at it from a use case standpoint. So, for instance, let's look at esports. When it comes to esports, you have these, League of Legends finals in China that are doing 60 or 70 million simultaneous viewers. We don't have anything close to that in America when it comes to sports. Not even close. Cricket, the Hotstar cricket last year in India, that was about 50 million simultaneous viewers at any given time. We don't have anything like that in the U.S. The Olympics was 1.5 million. That's it. In the U.S. Super Bowl was, 2.7, 3.2? Right? Now, that's more global, but certainly U.S.-centric. So you have to look at the content and you have to look at the regions of the world, and that's how you really determine sort of who the leaders are when it comes to purely just volume and usage and who's watching what and at what quality.
So these systems, say in India or in China, when these big events are going on, that indicates that they've got tremendously robust back end to support that. I mean, is that kind of infrastructure available in the United States? Do we have that and we're just not using it? Where do we stand?
So infrastructure, well, it's not what I think, right? We know the numbers, we know the details, but video delivery is done a lot of different ways. So Hotstar in India uses third-party CDNs like Akamai and others that rent out their infrastructure for content owners to use either one time or for a long period of time. Someone like Netflix delivers all the video themselves because they've gone and put out caches in all these different places around the world in what they call Open Connect, which is their platform to deliver video. So you have a combination of some content owners that are the largest out there. Think Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Netflix, who have deployed a lot of their own infrastructure, working with ISPs, telcos, and carriers and others to help deliver this video. But then you have other companies who actually rent the infrastructure and services that third-party companies have. So in the U.S., we have an amazing amount of capacity, which allows people to consume content in large volumes with great quality. The way I always describe that is, when was the last time you watched a Netflix video or a Hulu video or an Amazon video and the quality wasn't good? Right? Almost never. Now, yes, you might have an issue at time with a link or starting up slowly or whatnot. It happens. That's the way the technology works. But for the vast majority of services you look at on the internet here in the U.S., they're delivered with very good, what we call QoE, quality of experience, and at a high bit rate. So the bit rate here in the U.S. on an average video for something like that is somewhere between 4.5 to 8 megs per second. Now, the flip side is when you're looking at India, right, they might have more volume, but the quality of the stream is at a much, much lower level in the amount of megabits per second or kilobits per second. So it's a little apple versus oranges. You have to take all those factors into account. So it continues to get better. The biggest problem we have as an industry globally is not infrastructure. It's the business models. Right? What are people willing to pay for? Are they willing to pay for it? Do they want it for free, but they're willing to watch ads? Do they want no ads because they want to buy a subscription? It's not a right or wrong answer. It depends on the region, the content, and the user.
Wow, that's good insight. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, what about, you see coming online now, 8K televisions, and so there will be, if you have an 8K TV, there will be a demand at some point for 8K video. Is that,
no,
that's not going to happen?
No. I mean, Yeah, it's so funny when companies start talking about 8K, right? And they'll go, well, it's just like 4K. People will want it at some point. No, they won't. And the reason is, how many people today, 6 or 7 years after the streaming industry has been talking about 4K, are actually getting content in 4K? Very little. Less than 1% of all streams delivered in the U.S. through all these services are in 4K. Why is that?
I don't think there's a demand for it. I don't think the public, most people can't tell the difference.
There you go. You got it perfect. That's what I was going to say. Is the vast majority of people can't tell the difference between 1080 and 4K. Now, when you were going from 480 SD to 1080 HD, right, you could see that difference.
It was a dramatic difference, yes.
Dramatic, and even non-technical people could see it. Many cannot see it from 1080 4K. And also, that now that we're watching video on so many different size screens, iPhones, tablets, you don't need 4K on a 6 or 8 inch tablet or on your phone. So 4K you really only benefit from that from all the studies we've seen in the market. It's really got to be a 55-inch TV or above. It has to be the type of content that really excels with 4K, right? High action. And that's why you see a lot of these OTT services focusing more on HDR as opposed to 4K, because you can do HDR without having to do a 4K stream. So for all the companies talking about, and if you don't know what HDR is, it's high dynamic range. So it supports brighter highlights and a wider range of color detail. So
and it looks fantastic. I've looked at shows that were produced 10 years ago on HDR sets, and they look amazing.
They do, without having to have 4K. And I think, frankly, it's definitely more visually impactful than 4K. So while you do have vendors talking about 8K TVs and whatnot, the biggest problem here that nobody ever wants to talk about is the moment you deliver content in true 4K, not upscaled, but true 4K, that means you have to capture it in 4K, you have to store it in 4K, you have to edit it in 4K, and you have to transcode it in 4K. Your biggest cost is production. It's not delivery. So, for instance, your average video that you're encoding at 1080 versus 4K, it could take up to 7 times longer to encode that piece of video in 4K. Now, depends on your settings and what you're trying to do, but that's not uncommon. So when people just go, oh, well, everyone will shoot in 4K at some point because the quality is better. When you have companies like Netflix who publicly stated they will have a, quote, limited amount of content in 4K for years to come, the reason is there's just no business benefit. So content owners won't absorb the additional cost of video production, editing, storage, and everything else just to put it in 4K when consumers aren't asking for it, and in most cases are not willing to pay more for it. And that goes back to my earlier statement of the best technology is not what wins. It's what consumers adopt. It's what consumers want, and it's what there's a business model for.
I think that conflict between what's potential that manufacturers see or what some marketers might see and what customers want is a big divide. And I think the companies that understand what customers want are going to be ahead of the game. So I think
yes, and they have to have a better understanding what do consumers want. But again, I don't think it's so much what consumers want. It's what they're willing to pay for. Consumers want everything, right? We want the best of everything. Why not? But it all comes down to what we're willing to pay for.
Now, in your career, you have been invited to speak before Congress multiple times, and you've turned them down. Why have you done that?
Yes. So that was interesting. So during the net neutrality debate, and during the Comcast Time Warner merger hearings and some things like that, I did get invites by different groups like Congress and Senate to come testify as an expert witness about internet infrastructure technologies and video delivery and net neutrality rules and regulations, and who does it truly impact? Because as an independent analyst, I don't work for a cable company or an ISP. I don't work for a content owner. So when content owners were arguing with ISPs, everybody had a stake in the game there. I don't. I'm an analyst. I'm an independent analyst, blogger, author, writer, teacher. So they were looking for somebody to really come in and explain, cut through all the politics and explain what's really going on here. Who's going to be impacted? What is the impact to consumers and whatnot? So I did receive multiple invites. I did turn them all down. And the primary reason was a couple of things. First and foremost, just short notice. Right? They tell you, hey, we need you to be in DC in 3 days. Okay, that's not so bad. But then the problem is you have to submit whatever you're going to say in advance in writing. And you have to basically read from the script. Then they do Q&A with you off the cuff. But in 3 days, now you have to create an entire script of what you're going to say. And then you have to submit it to them the day before, right? So you really have to do it in the next 36 hours. It's not enough time, one. And then two, it's politics. You have politicians and whatnot who don't understand how any of these things work, who are trying to make rules and laws and regulations. And then you have companies who are trying to say they're doing the best thing in the interest of consumers, but they're doing the best thing in the interest of their bottom line. So I don't like that politics. I spent more of my time, instead of testifying, talking to a lot of members of Congress and Senate and different committees about here's what's actually going on, sharing data with them. And during about an 18-month period, the blog post I was writing, I mean, that was being picked up by pretty much every national tech publication because it was so detailed. A lot of these companies were leaking me data on what was going on behind the scenes, pricing, traffic charts and whatnot. So I decided to spend my time to really just do a ton of education through blogs and writing and going on TV, CNBC and whatnot, and talking about what was really taking place in the market, as opposed to focusing on doing a couple things on the Hill.
I get it. Last thing before we go, is cable, as we know it, is cable dead or dying? No.
Absolutely not. Great question. This is something my industry loves to argue. Cable TV is dead and dying is a headline you see many members of the media write. Is it changing? Yes. Are these companies adapting to that change because of their business models? Absolutely. So if we look at just what we've seen in the last, let's just call it 24 hours, Verizon put out earnings this morning. They lost 84,000 paid TV customers in Q1. And that's an 84,000 consumers who decided, I just don't need pay TV anymore. Yesterday, AT&T announced that they lost in Q1 897,000 pay TV customers, on top of another, it's about 100 plus thousand AT&T TV streaming only customers. So combined, they lost a million TV customers. So do we see cord cutting? Yes. Is it impacting how content is packaged, how it's sold? Absolutely. And we're definitely going to continue to see that. But the main thing that consumers don't understand is the business deals that take place behind the scenes for sports. So as an example, people say, well, at some point, the NFL will just put all the games on streaming and they'll charge you there. The NFL can't do that. And the reason they can't do that is they'll lose money. So when PBS and TNT and Fox and CBS, when these broadcast stations are willing, NBC, when they're willing to pay tens of billions of dollars a year combined for baseball and football and these other sports, you can't put that online and get enough people to subscribe directly at the fee you're going to charge. People are not going to pay $300 a year to get baseball games direct. And I know some people say, no, they definitely will. They won't. It's not a matter of what we think. We already know. We've already seen instances in the market where games have been sold for a single price. So you see the NFL and others doing a lot of interesting things every year, whereas we saw a couple of years ago, NFL did that deal with Twitter. Right? Twitter got, I think it was 12 games throughout the entire NFL games throughout the year, like one a week. Amazon has done a deal, right? So they did a deal with the NFL where they got games. So there are certain things that the NFL, for instance, is doing where they're giving the Thursday night football game to a digital property that's paying for it. But the reason Amazon is paying for it is because they're then giving it away for free if you're a Prime subscriber, because they want to get you onto Prime, because if they get you onto Prime, you buy more goods and services, and that's where they make their money. So they're using it as a way to generate revenue from other products and services. Same with someone like Twitter.
Why does the NFL continue with the direct NFL ticket on DirecTV? Why wouldn't they shop that out to other people? It seems to be just an unusual choice to me.
So it will be shopped out. Those deals are always shopped out, right? So other companies can bid on it. And at times we see that. But so far, you have companies in the market that are willing to pay a certain amount of money for that. So let's take the DirecTV. DirecTV extended an 8-year deal last year for $12 billion. $12 billion. So DirecTV paid $1.5 billion a year to keep that on their network because they see a benefit to it.
That explains why it's still there. I see.
There you go. So you have to stop and think, who's willing to pay $1.5 billion? Now, right away, people go, oh, well, Google can afford that. Apple can afford that. Yes, I don't disagree. But you don't see them doing it because they don't see a way where it makes sense for them.
Yeah, they don't need that. Money. Google doesn't need that business that badly. They don't. And DirecTV, that's their lifeblood. It makes sense for them to do it. I see that.
It does. And also the NFL is looking at how can they get revenue from many different sources, right? If we can get it from Amazon for certain games, we get it from DirecTV, we get it from the broadcasters and the regional guys. They want to have a diversified revenue stream. And yet, at the same time, we're talking NFL. I tweeted out last night, I thought it was very odd that the NFL, who keeps talking about wanting to get younger kids, I shouldn't say kids, younger people involved in their sport, excited about the sport, didn't make the NFL draft stream available for free. You have to have a pay TV subscription and authenticate. Yeah. I mean, that makes no sense.
Yeah, I think I think they make a mistake by having so much of their content on lockdown too. I just do. But those are decisions they make. As we go towards the future, how do you see the streaming services? Will they combine in 5 years? Will Netflix and Hulu? I mean, what do you think is going to happen? What do we expect?
Well, I think it looks a lot like what we see already today. Consumers are going to have a lot of choice, a lot of options in the market, more coming in. Quibi just launched. Peacock will launch in July. HBO Max launches in May. Apple launched last November. Disney launched, right, Q4 of last year. We've had 5 or 6 services come into the market in less than a year. And these are services that are owned by conglomerates like AT&T, Disney, Apple, Comcast. These are big companies. So a lot of at stake, spending billions of dollars to get these services out into the market. So the great news is we'll have more choice. And I think as consumers, we all love choice. But with choice also comes fragmentation, confusion. And also, while many want to suggest that Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Disney all compete with one another with content, many times they don't. Many times the content is very different. But where all these services are competing day one with all of us, no matter what you like to watch, is simply our time. We all have a limited amount of time in the day to consume content. Spotify, Pandora, reading the news, being on Instagram, short-form video, long-form TV shows and movies. There's so much content overload right now that we all simply don't have enough time to see everything that's out there. And then from a budgeting standpoint, we have to decide how much money do we want to spend across how many services to get our entertainment.
Right. I think what you said earlier when we started, that 16 million new subscribers on Netflix is because people have extra time right now, but that time's going to go away, hopefully. And so that number will go down.
It will. The other question is, just in the U.S., you've got over 20 million people now, who have filed for unemployment, and the number's going up. So we don't know what that's going to look like over the next, honestly, 2 to 3 years. We don't know how quickly, hopefully that goes down. It's going to take time, but also you have to look at some of these people who are paying $15 a month for Netflix, and people are like, oh, $15 a month is not a lot. It's a lot when you've lost your job. So
absolutely.
I think that's something else we have to look at globally, is based on the economic recession we're in and going into, and that could impact it. Now, flip side is we've had some economic issues in the past, of course, the mortgage crisis and housing crisis. And it's interesting during those times how you see things like Netflix do well, because people will cut a lot of other entertainment or other costs in their life, because frankly, at $15 a month or Disney Plus at $6 a month, it's a lot of entertainment for a family of 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. You're not spending a lot of money each month to make a lot of people happy with choice.
That's
so I don't think it's not a huge drop in these services. But there's definitely an impact, and especially when you have multiples. So some people are saying it's great HBO Max is coming out, because now we're going to have tons of more people in the market signing up for that service. Okay, but are they signing it up for HBO Max while canceling another? Because then it's not a new net addition. It's just they change their spending and their dollars from here to here.
Yeah, those are really good points, I think. Yeah, because there's only so much money and there's only so much time. Dan Rayburn, I really, really appreciate you sharing this information with our open source audience. I really thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. If anyone has any follow-up questions, they're happy to go to my blog at streamingmediablog.com. Pretty simple. My phone number's up there. My email's up there. Just shoot me a question.
I will definitely put that information when we post the podcast. My guest has been Dan Rayburn, streaming media guru. And this is Open Source with Tony Motley. We'll talk to you next time. Open Source with Tony Motley is a production of Duet Digital Media and McLaughlin Media.